Welcome, everyone. We will begin the webinar on hiring and retaining skilled employees. I'm Melissa Jolls with RDA Impact. Paul Gage, President of Pro Collision Training, will be your presenter today. The presentation will take approximately 45 minutes. We are recording it and we'll post it on our YouTube channel. If you have questions during the webinar, you can type them in the chat box at the bottom right of your screen, and we'll answer those. Paul will answer those throughout the presentation. Now, I'll turn it over to Paul.
Well, good afternoon, good afternoon, Melissa. It's good to be here, and for everybody that's listening, I appreciate you joining in. My name is Paul Gage. I'm the president of Pro Collision Training. Been in the automotive industry for about 28 years now, and I've been focused on the training side for most of that, about 25 of it. I've worked in body shops. I've worked in the insurance side. I've worked for NASCAR. I've worked all over the industry. And I love this industry. I have a great passion for it. And I have a great passion for the people that work in the industry. And so I really am thankful for Melissa inviting me, and I'm thankful for everybody coming on. And webinars are always a little interesting for me because I usually do live presentations. But certainly, as you have questions, please type those in. Melissa will get them to me, and I'll be happy to answer them. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and jump in. And I want to start off by talking about what's going on in our industry and giving you a scenario. And the scenario really stems from the fact that what we're doing in the collision repair industry is we're attacking new problems with old solutions. And as we go through this presentation today, I'm going to address more of that. But the new problems that we're facing are the disruption of a new type of workforce. Millennials are coming into our workplace, and a lot of our industry does not know how to deal with that or doesn't want to have to deal with that. And so what I want to do is really kind of lay out where we're going and what it takes to retain people, to recruit people. What is a workforce looking for today as far as long-term employment and a place to stay, a place to hang their hat. And I want to start off with this concept of attacking new problems with old solutions by telling you about a scientific study that was done about 30 years ago. And if any of you are familiar with the study done almost 100 years ago by the scientist Pavlov, he did how he could condition a dog by ringing a bell and giving food pellets. And this is similar. This was done about 30 years ago. And what happened was they took scientists took four monkeys, put them in a room with a ladder in the middle of the room, 6 feet tall, and bananas on top of the ladder. And every time one of the monkeys tried to go up the ladder to get the bananas, the scientists would come in and hose down all four monkeys with water as a punishment for one of them trying to go up the ladder. And what happened eventually was the monkeys, if one of them went up the ladder, the other four, so as not to get hosed down, would grab that monkey, pull him down off the ladder, and beat the tar out of him. Because they didn't want to get punished. Well, then once they had conditioned those four monkeys that way, the scientists started switching out monkeys. And so they would take one monkey that had been in there that had been hosed down with water and replace them with another monkey. And when that monkey would go for the bananas, the other monkeys would grab him and beat the tar out of him. Well, eventually they had switched out all four monkeys. And the result was still the same. Anytime a monkey went for the ladder to go get the bananas, the other ones who had never been hosed down, had never been punished by the scientists, they would grab that monkey and they would beat him up, pull him down off the ladder and beat him up. And the principle behind that was the monkeys didn't know why they were doing what they were doing. They just knew that that's the way it had always been. We've always done it this way. So that's what I hear so often in our industry is we talk about staffing issues, we talk about retention issues, we talk about all these things, but as I talk to folks about how they address them, they're addressing them with these same old type of solutions that they don't work anymore. And when I say, why do you do that? That's just the way we've always done it. And it takes me back to the monkeys. They don't know why they're doing it that way. It's just the way it's always been done. So I kind of want to push that envelope a little bit with you today. And I want to do that by starting off and looking at the issues. So we talk about this in meetings, and I see it written in the newspapers and trade magazines, but let's really dig into this for a minute. So we know the high schools, as far as the trades, they're not working for us. They're failing. And I want to give you some reasons behind that. The first one is the educational influencers are against the trades. So who's the educational influencer? It's predominantly the parents and the guidance counselors. Most parents do not want their kids going into the trades. We've seen this, over many years now. They want their kids to go to college, get a 4-year degree, go to work as a doctor, as a lawyer, whatever it is. And they really steer their kids away from the trades. But we know, and we're hearing more talk about this today, we know that there's a lot of kids that don't want to go to a 4-year college. They want to go work with their hands. But there's a lot of roadblocks for them. And again, that comes from the educational influencers. The second problem that we have at the high school level is the cost of the equipment and the curriculum that they teach. So when you stop and think about it, a lot of them focus on custom painting, airbrushing. And if I have body shop owners or managers on this call right now, there's not one of you probably that sells as a major part of your business airbrushing and custom painting. And they do that to put butts in the seats in the high school programs, and I get that. But the problem is you have to have very expensive equipment to do that. So we need spray booths and big compressors. They'll have frame machines in these programs. They'll have welding equipment in these programs at the high school level. And I don't know of anybody that's going to go into a high school program and hire someone to come in and be a lead painter or a frame tech. So a lot of that equipment where the schools are struggling for budgeting, they feel like they have to spend their money on this really expensive equipment, and that's really not what needs to happen. So that interferes with what we're doing. And then the last piece of it is these programs turn into babysitting programs. People say, well, Johnny, he has a hard time in English. He's disruptive in the class, so let's send him to the automotive program. Or, let's send him to the electrical program or whatever it is. And so all of a sudden our instructors, instead of being able to train students to go into a trade and work with their hands, are spending more time babysitting students that don't really want to be there. So that's an issue. We've watched this go on for many years. Then we step up to the trade schools, and I ran a trade school. So part of my history is I built the program at Fayetteville Technical Community College back starting in 2014. And I ran into a lot of issues when I was running that program. I ran it for 3 years as the director of transportation. And what we found when I started building that program is the curriculum that was available to most of the schools is outdated. And the ones that were using an ICAR curriculum that had availability to that didn't know how to teach it. The instructors didn't have an understanding of what goes on with cars today. If we go into schools today and talk to the instructors and say, hey, can you talk to me about ADAS systems? They have no idea what I'm talking about. If we start talking about how to repair aluminum, or we talk about how to work with ultra high strength steel, they have absolutely no clue how to deal with any of that. And they don't have any cars in their programs that allow them to deal with that. A lot of them are just doing restorations. And so they're really not preparing students to come to work in our industry. The other thing that a lot of people don't realize when you stop and think about it, college programs make their money off tuition. And one of the things that I found very interesting was there was no real motivation to place people in jobs. They would rather see that person go on to a 4-year school or go into another program, preferably another program at the community college level, so they can continue to get tuition from that person. Made it very difficult for me as a director because there were people that I knew weren't going to make it in our industry, but I couldn't get rid of them. I couldn't move them out because the schools wanted the tuition. And so just like, our customers make money by repairing cars, if someone comes and says, hey, I've got, here's 5 cars I need to get repaired, you're not going to say, well, I'll fix 2 of them, but I don't want to do any more than that. Send the other ones down the road. Of course, you're going to keep those cars. Schools are the same way. They want the tuition money. And so that's what they're working towards. Some of the schools have a bad habit of over-promising to their students. I've had students that have come to me and say, hey, I'm a $100,000 a year technician, and they can't even identify all the tools that they need to work with. And that's not an issue with the student. That's a failing of the school. It's a failing of the education system. And then the last piece of that is we get into funding. And these schools run short on funding, and believe it or not, that's an issue that comes from us. So often in our industry, we poach other shops to get people, or we go to our employees and say, hey, do you know anybody that's looking for a job? And the problem is we don't post those positions as open. And the funding that goes into the college programs is based on the way the state looks at how many jobs are open or how many people are required in certain areas or certain jobs. So when we're not posting jobs, they're not tracking that we have the need. And so the funding gets shifted away. And these are things that I learned while I was working in the school systems that I didn't understand before I got there, but I now understand how much that affects what we do and the funding that goes into these programs. And then we're left with the collision industry. Well, we're left to pick up the pieces, right? We have to take people that come out of programs that haven't adequately prepared them, and we put them with people on a shop floor that are production technicians, production painters. These folks are there to do a job. They're not equipped and prepared to teach the skills that these people we're hiring need to learn. And so we have a situation where they view the apprentice as a hindrance to their job. On top of that, a lot of the programs that we see across the country, they'll take money away from that technician because we gave that technician a quote unquote helper in the form of an apprentice, but the apprentice doesn't know how to do anything yet. And so they're slowing down the technician, but we're taking money away from that technician, which gives it's more averse for the technician to even want an apprentice. They really want to focus on the work they're doing so they can make money. And then again, when we talked about this, taking people from other body shops, and I use the term poaching, that's a harsh term, but even when we go to our employees and say, hey, do you know anybody at another shop that's looking for a job, or they're looking to come? Again, because we don't post those jobs, it actually has an effect on the funding for the schools. So those are things that we need to consider. So where do we go from here? So the staffing questions that I run into and the things that I talk about all over the country when I do presentations like this are threefold. The first one is staffing decisions are business decisions. And so often I see managers and business owners get caught up in the personal side because we're dealing with individuals. And I appreciate that. And I want to make sure that I'm very clear. I think people need to be given the opportunity to succeed. I think they need to be trained. I think they need to be held accountable, all of those things. So it's not a matter of, oh, somebody's not doing their job, we should just get rid of them. I think we need to pay some attention to what they need to do their job well. But ultimately, we have to make a business decision around staffing just like we do everything else in the shop. The next thing I'm going to talk about is the cardinal sin of staffing, and then something that many of you may not have seen, which is the cost of restaffing. So let's start with the first one. HR decisions are personnel decisions, not personal decisions. And yes, we hope that we have a good working environment where people get along and we're friendly and we have a good relationship with the people that we work with. I want that. Obviously, a big focus of what I do is developing people. So I put a lot of emphasis on helping people grow and develop and doing training. I want to see people succeed. But you do get to a point where you say, this job is not for you. You're not cut out for this. And when it comes to personnel in our businesses, sometimes we struggle with that because it's an interpersonal relationship that we're working with. And so I challenge business owners and managers to remember that at the end of the day, it is a business decision. It's a personnel decision, and we have to consider it that way. The next one is what I call the cardinal sin of staffing. And this is what I see so many organizations do. My organization has worked with staffing. We've had a staffing department, and I would get companies that would call me and they would say, we want you to come do staffing. And I would say, okay, for what positions? We just need people. Well, one of the issues that we run into is that we pursue new staff without securing the current staff. And so many of you may have heard this, but I get this a lot when I go in and I do surveys and I'm working with collision centers and working with the staff inside the collision centers. And I'll get the question very often, hey, listen, if I quit and come back, will they give me a signing bonus? Signing bonuses had it, and I think it's starting to wane a little bit, but the signing bonuses were a really big deal. And so we've got people inside an organization that have been loyal to us. We have people inside organizations that want to advance, but we go outside the organization to fill positions. And it creates a lot of controversy and animosity with the staff that we have because oftentimes they feel like they're being overlooked. And so before we go out and start recruiting, we need to make sure that we've taken care of our current staff. The other issue that we have when we talk about this is you may not realize what you have in your organization. I had a CEO of a company that I was working with come to me and he said, listen, we need estimators. And I had done what we'll talk about here in a little bit. I had done a survey of all of his staff, went in and sat down and talked to all of his staff. It was 400 or 500 people. And he said, we need estimators. And I said, no, actually what you need are CSRs and parts people. He said, we got plenty of CSRs and parts people. We need estimators. And I said, you're not hearing what I'm saying. You have CSRs and parts people that want to move into the estimating role. That's what they told us when we surveyed them. They want to be trained to move into the estimating role. So instead of going out and hiring people from outside, which is going to upset the staff that you have, let's advance the people you have in your organization, and then we hire more CSRs and we hire more parts people or detailers or whatever it is. Those jobs are easier to fill than an estimator role. So we want to make sure that we find that staff, if we can, within our organization. And you think about it, they all already understand our SOPs, they understand our culture, they have an understanding of our computer systems and everything else, instead of having to retrain someone when we train someone that we hire outside. And the expense of that is really very expensive, and I want to cover that. If we go out and hire a front-end estimator, say a $50,000 employee, you are going to spend the $50,000 on their salary, benefits, all those things. But then you're going to spend an additional $25,000 to $40,000 training that person into your organization, teaching them culture, teaching them SOPs, teaching them, again, computer systems, all these different things that we have to work with, getting them trained to work with different direct repair programs if you deal with direct repair. All of those different things take time and money. And we're taking someone from outside an organization, bringing them in and making them part of the organization, where it's much more cost effective to take somebody that already is within the organization and train them into that new role. I'm going to spend way less money training that person than I am bringing someone in from outside. But then we look at highly skilled employees. And when I talk about highly skilled employees, these are your frame techs, your really good welders, people, your aluminum techs, people like that. And what we find out is it costs about 213% of their yearly pay to train them. So if you bring somebody in and they're going to earn $72,000, you're going to pay $153,360 in training for that $72,000 employee. Again, if we can take somebody from within our organization and develop them, it's much more cost effective than it is to bring people in from the outside. And these are things that I always try and encourage business owners and managers to think about before they go out and take what I call a shotgun approach to recruiting. Let's just go out and gather as many people as we can and let's see, who sticks. So what's the rest of the problem? We have young people that aren't joining our industry, and we all know that. Parents don't want their young people joining the industry, and we talked about that from the role of the educational influencer. We have guidance counselors that don't know anything about our industry, and I know that because I've spent countless hours in meetings with career technical education counselors, talking to them about our industry, the type of work that we do, the type of materials we work with, the money that people make, and they are absolutely dumbfounded. They will sit there with their mouths hanging open because they have no understanding of how technically advanced this industry really is. And then again, schools aren't motivated to place people in industry. They're motivated to collect tuition. So why don't young people come into our industry? And the really simple reason is we don't provide the type of workplace the modern employee wants to work in. And that's exactly where we're at with this. And I'm going to spend a little bit of time on this so you can understand. So this information comes from Forbes. They did an article on this. There's a lot of different articles out there. But they talked about millennials, the modern employee, which, by the way, by 2020 is going to make up 50% of our workforce. So by 2020, a year and a half from now, millennials will make up 50% of our workforce. So hopefully you'll pay attention to what I'm saying. Millennials and the modern employee, they want flexibility and freedom. They do not want to be micromanaged. They want a collaborative environment. They want focused written development plans. This is huge. They don't just want somebody saying, yeah, I'll keep an eye on I've got something in my head. They want to see what it looks like. They want to know what success looks like. They want to know when they're going to advance. So that's really important. They work for a lifestyle. And this is something that's really unique to millennials we haven't seen before. They don't work for the future. They work for the lifestyle they want right now. So if I can live in mom and dad's basement and all I want to do is go ride my motorcycles on the weekends with my friends and drink beer, okay, well, I can come to a body shop and make this much money, $15 an hour, $12 an hour, whatever it is. Or I can go over to McDonald's and make the same amount of money. The job doesn't matter to me because I'm simply working for a lifestyle. And so we have to understand that piece and help them attain that lifestyle and keep up with them as their lifestyle changes. That's where we need to really approach this. They want to have their opinions considered. And I can't tell you how many times I've seen an apprentice who might be very, very good with technology and understands how to look up repair procedures and talk about repair procedures. And they're working with an older tech who may not understand that technology the same way. And they look down on that apprentice and say, well, what do you know? You haven't been doing this very long. But there is value that they bring. They want their opinions considered. They want to be in that collaborative environment. They want to be part of the team and part of the decision-making process. And they want to work in an environment that's focused on diversity and inclusion. So we deal with so many technicians that are only focused on the money, and that's very typical. I'm Gen X, and so it's very typical for Gen X to be focused on status, position, money, title, things like that. Millennials are more concerned, and our modern workforce is much more concerned about the people they work around, the flexibility that they have. What impact are they having on society? Are they doing something good for the community, for the environment, things like that? They're thinking along those terms. And if we're managing them solely from a financial focus, we're missing a big driver of what they're looking for when they're trying to get value out of their employment. So having understood that, I come back and ask this question. And I just want you to think for yourself, would you work for you? If you were a millennial and you understand, let me go back to it, you understand what they're looking for in a workplace, would you, as a millennial, come to work for your organization? Is it a good working environment? Is it clean? Right? Are there parts laying all over the place? Is it a nice environment? Is it well lit? Is it someplace that they want to show up every day? Do you have a good culture? Is it something that people want to be part of? And I want to talk about this for a minute. When I was working at the college, I was working with an MSO group. And they had one of their HR people there. And as we were talking about different opportunities for job placement, their HR attorney kept saying, we have to do employment contracts. They're going to leave. They're going to leave. They're going to leave. We know they're going to leave. And so finally I said to him, I said, you're so focused on the fact that these people are going to leave. And he said, well, that's what happens. They're all going to leave. And I said, well, why not create a culture where they want to stay? And he really didn't have an answer for that because he hadn't thought about that. He had only thought about the fact that everybody's going to leave. And so their culture was really, without them thinking about it, their culture had become a culture of people leaving, not people staying. So they had become accustomed to going out and trying to find replacements on short notice because they know people are going to leave versus trying to develop people. The next one is the too good conundrum. And this is one that I see all the time. We have an employee that wants to advance. Let's say they're a really good CSR and we want to move them up they want to move up into an estimating role. And we say, oh, we can't move you up into an estimator. You're too good at what you do. You're too good with the customers. You're too well organized. You do this job so well. How could I ever replace you? And we think we're paying them a compliment by telling them how good they are. What we're missing is they've already made a decision that they want to advance and move up. And this is where people miss. This is where business owners really miss this. And that is, if you have somebody that wants to advance, they're going to advance. The only question is, are they going to do it within your organization, or are they going to do it at another organization? I was working with an organization that had a body tech that wanted to move from being a body tech into being an estimator. And the operations person actually drove to that body shop to talk that body tech out of moving up because he was such a good body tech. What he didn't understand, and I found out later, was the body tech's wife was pregnant, and she didn't want him working on the shop floor anymore. She wanted him to move up into the front office and maybe move into management. So as a family, they had made a decision that this person was going to advance. And here's the operations person saying, no, we can't do that. You need to stay where you are. You're too good at what you do. And I hope you're listening to what I'm saying, because I see this so often. This is one of the most common problems that I have. And the reason we run into the too good conundrum is because we're not developing people to move into the role that would be left vacant. And those are the things that we need to consider. My next question, if you would work for you, do you hold people accountable? And this is a really big question. I was working on the shop floor with my students one day, and I had a couple of students, and they were very good students, and they came to me and said, hey, who's going to quality check our work when we leave here? Once we graduate the program and go into a shop, who's going to quality check our work? Who's going to make sure that we're doing it right? And it was a really difficult question to answer because a lot of shops don't have good quality control programs in place. Hopefully you do. But my point behind this is good employees want to be held accountable. They want to be held to a standard. They want to believe that what they're doing is a quality job for a quality organization. Those are the employees that we want to retain. And so often I see managers and say, oh, I don't want to hold somebody accountable in this way or that way because I'm afraid they'll leave. And it's amazing how many times when I've gone into shops and worked with them and I've said, that quality, it needs to go back to the body tech. And I've had people say, it's really nice to be held accountable. We really appreciate being held to a standard because we want to feel like we're doing good quality work. So it's something that we need to really consider. The next one, do you have advancement opportunities? If you bring somebody into your organization, do you have a plan of where they would top out? How far can they go in your organization? If you have one store or two stores, how far can people, advance? If you have 20 stores, how far can people advance? What roles do you have? Have you considered that to understand how people are going to move within your organization? One of the things that we've learned about Gen X, my generation, and even baby boomers, but I can tell you that 73% of baby boomers will tell you that they are going to work into retirement, or Gen X, they're going to work into retirement, and 5% of that population says they're never going to retire. So you have people in your organization, and it may not be a large number, but you have people in your organization that are looking to extend their career. How are they going to do that within, or can they even do that within your organization? If you have somebody that's, 58, 60 years old, they're slowing down, they're not able to turn the production hours on the shop floor, but they're still a very valuable individual. What do you have for them to entice them to extend their career with you? Those are things you have to think about. And then you also have to think about the people coming in the door. The CSR, the porter, the detailer, those people you just brought in your organization. Are they going to stay with you? Do they have a career path? Do they know what that career path is? That's really important. And then the last question that your employees are asking every day is your business stable? And we see this with particularly body techs. They judge how stable your business is based on what's in the parking lot waiting to be repaired. They're looking out the door and saying, boy, there's not many cars out there. I may have to start looking for another job. I may have to start looking in another shop. But if we've created an environment where there is something more than just the number of cars in the parking lot, enticing them to stay with me, they're not as quick to make that decision. Also, when you have advancement opportunities, and this does tie, the stability ties into advancement opportunities and development plans, if you have those things and someone else is hiring, If they're simply offering $1 or $2 an hour more, now if I have to overcome $1 or $2 an hour more does not overcome my pay plus a development plan and a career path within the organization I'm at. And that's some of the things that we need to use to create that retention. So how do we create retention? We do it through succession and development planning. But the problem with this, or where we run into issues, is people use succession and development planning as a post-recruiting activity, and I want to tell you that it's a pre-recruiting activity. So one of the things that my organization does is we'll come in and sit down and we'll survey every employee in your organization. So let's say we go into a shop. We survey 20 people working in that shop. We find out how long they've been there. Do they like it? Where do they want to be in 3 years? Where do they want to be in 5 years? Where do they want to be when they retire? What type of training would they want to take? Do they want to advance into learning how to work with, different types of construction materials? What do they want to do? And then we're able to take that information back and build what I call a chessboard, which lays all those people out in one visual. And it shows you who wants to move where. Are they mobile? Could they move to another shop within your organization? Things like that. And all of a sudden, you understand what you have. So instead of going out and recruiting outside your organization to fill the needs you think you have, you actually have a blueprint of where people want to be in your organization, and then you hire to backfill. And what this does is it creates a retention with your staff, and it shows people that you value the time that they've put in with you. That it's not just about, I've got to have more people, so we're going to go out and do whatever we have to do. We're building a long-term plan for the staff that's there to create retention. That's what we're trying to do. That takes a succession and development plan, and that has to be done before you recruit. It's absolutely critical. And one thing I want to add with this really quick, if you have people that want to advance in your organization and you're getting ready to go out and hire, even if you're not convinced that the people in your organization are ready to move up and take those roles, give them an opportunity to interview anyway. Let them interview for the role and provide them good quality feedback to say, hey, look, you interviewed for the role. We're going to hire somebody outside the organization, but this is why, and these are the areas you need to work on in order to be ready to take this position the next time one comes available. People look at that and say, okay, they do see value in me. They do want me to move up. They want me to advance. It's a lot more difficult when they're upset and they come to you after the fact and say, hey, listen, I'm going down the road to go to work for somebody else because you obviously don't have any intention of advancing me. You may not have even known what their intentions were. It wasn't something that you did to begrudge that individual. You just didn't know what they were looking for. And so taking the time to understand what my employees want is really critical to having good employee retention, having a good culture within my organization, and that all needs to happen through succession and development planning before I start recruiting. So I want to get into the employee value matrix here, which is something that Melissa's going to send out. She's going to send you this presentation, and she's going to get you the value matrix. And I want to take you through an exercise that I do with all of my groups. But before I do that, I just wanted to stop and see, are there any questions about anything I've brought up so far? Melissa, is there anything out there?
Not yet, no. And this is just really excellent information, just really good information.
Okay. Thank you. All right, then I'll keep going. So one of the things that I do, and I created this a number of years ago, I created something called an employee value matrix. And what it does is it breaks down the role, the actual role, the estimated role, the CSR role, the manager role, whatever it is, without giving any consideration to the person that's in that role. And then the other side of the matrix is the actual people that we have doing the jobs. And so where I find business owners and managers to struggle is they consider the value of a role, let's say a structural technician in their shop, they value that role based on the person that's in it. And I tell the story this way. I was working with a group out of a very affluent area in North Carolina. And it was an older community of very, very affluent people. And I was talking to the owner of this group of shops, and in conversation, he said, "Do you know who the most valuable employee I have, the most valuable position in my organization?" And I said, "What's that?" He says, "It's my porter. My porter is the most important person because we drive and pick up customers to come get their cars. We take them home after they've dropped their cars off, things like that. And so that person spends a considerable amount of time with that customer, and they've become a real face for my organization. I have to be very careful who I put in the porter role in my shop because of the type of community that I'm in." And I found that really fascinating because so often you think, it's a porter. What's the big deal? But for his business, it was a very big deal. It was one of the most important positions he had in his organization. He actually put that porter position above a painter or a structural tech. That person had a huge effect on his business. So it's really what drove me to come up with this value matrix, was to understand, okay, it's not about the person, it's about the importance of that role and then the type of person that I put in that role. So my challenge, as you start looking at all of the roles across your organization, and again, I'm talking about detailers and preppers and apprentices and body techs and structural techs and managers, whatever it is, you need to break it down this way. And so I'm going to go through each of these and kind of talk about them briefly. The first one, your business could run without someone in this role. I call this the Walmart greeter position, right? This is someone that, Walmart could function fine without the greeters at the door. However, it's a wonderful community service to have those folks there. It gives them value. And they really do, most of them do a great job making you feel welcome. Is it a job they absolutely have to fill? No, they don't. But it is a really nice position to have there. It's not going to have a huge negative effect on their business if they're not there. And so we have to look at, though, do we have anybody in a role like that in our organization? It's nice to have someone there, but your business could run without it. The second one is your business could run without this person, but you would feel it. There's definitely some value to that role. It may not be a mission critical type role, but you'd like to have somebody there because it's just good. It kind of takes some pressure off of some of the other folks. The third piece in this matrix, if you have a vacancy in this job, you're going to put undue stress on the rest of your employees. So let's say you have 4 estimators up front and one of them leaves. Can you write all the estimates? Yes, you can. But it is going to put an undue amount of stress on your CSRs and other people in the organization to keep up with the work. It really does benefit you to have a 4th estimator. Then you've got position number 4. A vacancy in this position is going to have a negative effect on your business. I think about this as a shop that does a lot of work, has some good paint preppers. And if you lose a couple of paint preppers or one really good paint prepper, it is going to slow down how many vehicles you're able to get out through your paint booths. And so this becomes a really critical piece. Remember, when we start looking at a body shop can only deliver as many cars as they can paint. It's not how many they can put together or how many they can get through body. They have to get through the paint booth. So anything that's slowing down that process is going to have a negative effect on my business. And then you've got that last role, that mission critical role, right? And you have to look at your organization and figure out what is that mission critical role. For the shop in North Carolina, it was a porter. A person was really important. It might be a structural tech. Maybe you're aluminum certified, and so the aluminum tech is mission critical in your organization. Or maybe it's a particular estimator that does a really good job. They're mission critical. You have to identify that role in your organization. And again, I talked about an estimator. I don't mean the person. I mean that role, that particular role. So you have to look at those roles. Then we have to look at the people that we have in those roles. So the next piece is what I call the risk value. Risk value rates the person. And I want to talk about this for just a minute, because when we talk about risk value and we talk about attrition, we always think about attrition in a negative sense. We always think about, if somebody has a high flight risk, right? They've got a real high potential for flight risk. That's a negative thing. But I want to caution you about that, because a flight risk, when you look at it, is for a position, not for a company. And we're going to look at this with an exercise in just a minute, but I want you to keep that in your mind, that the risk value is not only for negative attrition, but it's also for positive attrition. People moving up, people advancing in your organizations are still going to leave an empty spot within the organization in the position they moved out of. Again, I go back to the too good conundrum. I can't afford to have you move up because I don't know how I'm going to fill that position. It's not the employee's problem. The employee wants to advance. So we start looking at our employees. And again, this is regardless of the job they do, we really start looking at the employee. We say, okay, a level 1, risk value 1, that employee is very stable. They've been with you for many years. They're almost never sick. They never miss. They come in on time. They go home when the work's done. They've got a good attitude. They understand your culture, right? I'm sure there's a bunch of people out there right now saying, I wish I had 100 of those people. And as I'm going through these people, you probably have names and pictures coming in and names and faces coming in your head of saying, wow, that really describes this individual. A very stable person is someone who has been with you and they're going to continue to stay with you. They're happy in the job that they're in. They have no desire to advance. I was talking to someone the other day and they were telling me about a parts person in their shop. And they had talked to the parts person and said, do you want to move up front and start towards an estimator role? And they said, no, absolutely not. I don't like people. I don't want to be around people. I like being in parts. That's great. They've been an employee for a long time. They're very good at what they do, and they want to stay in parts. That is a risk value 1 in my estimation. That person's very stable where they're at. A risk level value 2, they're pretty stable, right? They're mostly stable. They might be late occasionally. They might, be sick, might be out with a family illness or something. They have maybe some aspirations to advance, but they're really not aggressive about it, right? That's that person in parts who's saying, yeah, at some point I'd probably like to become an estimator, but I'm pretty good right now. That's someone who's mostly stable. And then you have just a normal, stable person. They're going to be open to opportunities if they come up. They may not be actively pursuing other opportunities. They may not be, they're dependable. I would call this person a workhorse. They're dependable. They show up, they do what they're supposed to do most of the time. You might have the occasional tardiness issue. They may be a little more aggressive about advancement. They want to make more money or whatever it is. But you look at that. Then they start moving into the risk values 4 and 5. These are the people that are getting much more, we have to be more concerned about. So a risk value 4 is a potential flight risk. This is somebody, and again, this could go a number of different ways. This is someone who really wants to advance. This is an estimator who really would like to move into management, right? They know they may not be ready yet, but they've got their eye on that GMC. They know that they want to move into that, or regional manager position. These people know that they want to move up. Or this may be the person that walks around the shop kind of scowling all the time saying, this place will fall apart if I wasn't here. I'm not real happy with what's going on. Again, we've got that positive attrition and negative attrition, but at the end of the day, what I'm looking at is a person who is looking to leave either that position that they're in or my organization altogether. Either way, it leaves a vacancy that's important to me. And then the last one is the 1 foot out the door. This person, they're leaving. They've already put in their 2-week notice in their head, right? They're getting ready to go. You see them walking around the shop. You talk to them on the phone, and you can hear it in their voice. Or they are absolutely spot on. They are a rock star. You're looking for a place to put them. As soon as that right position opens up, you want to move them up. They're your number 1 choice for that. Again, we have to look at this from both the positive and the negative, because either condition is going to leave a vacancy in my organization that I'm going to have to deal with. So we look at the job, the role itself, and determine how important is that role in my organization. And then we look at the person who's in that role, and that tells me how much I need to be focusing on having a replacement for that person in that role based on how important that role is. That's how the matrix works out. So let's take a look at somebody. I want you to meet Steve. Steve is a manager. He's 30 years old. He's been employed with you for 11 months, but he's been with the organization longer. He came to you from a sister location. He's single. He has no kids. He's a hard worker. He's very aggressive from a career standpoint. He's made it clear that he wants to go as far as possible within your organization. His ultimate goal is to be a regional manager or higher. And he's a good employee. He works well with others, although he pushes his team really hard. I have people that will look at this, and a lot of you may be looking at Steve and saying, oh man, he's a manager, so he's a 5. That's the most important position I have in my shop. And look at him. I mean, he's really committed to the organization. He's told us he wants to move up. He's a 1, maybe a 2 as far as stability goes. But I want to challenge you on that. So first of all, is the manager the most important role? And this is a tricky question because I'm sure I've got a bunch of, I've got managers on the line here. Is the manager the most important role in the shop? I've heard people tell me that a really good manager should be able to leave their shop to go on vacation or things like that, and shops still run pretty well. So is that manager, is that a level 5 position, a mission critical position? You have to look at your organization and determine that. Right? So if you determine when you determine where that manager role falls as far as the priority value matrix, then you have to take a look at the person you have in it. So here's the person I have. This is Steve. And we know that Steve is real aggressive about his career, and he's single, and he wants to move up, and he's been with the organization, and he does a really good job. And so often when I do this exercise with shops, they'll say, oh, Steve is a 2, right? As far as that risk factor. He's not going anywhere. He's going to stay with the organization. But I would tell you, when I look at Steve, I see a 5 on risk value. This guy's got 1 foot out the door. He's made it very clear that he wants to move up. And so I have a couple of choices that I have to make with Steve. I either try and keep him where he is because he's really good at what he does, or I look for a position to move him up to, and I have to be developing somebody to move into Steve's role. Because not only is that role going to be and I'm assuming a manager is going to run in your organization somewhere between a 3 and a 5. So it's a relatively important role for most shops. And I've got to have somebody that's as good as Steve or close to as good as Steve to move into that role. And that's not easy to find. So instead of trying to hold Steve back, knowing that he is going to move because he wants to be a regional. So whether it happens with me or whether it happens with my competitor, he's going to move up. If I control that situation, I create the opportunity, the path of least resistance for Steve to move into a regional manager role, and then utilize that opportunity for Steve to help him train his replacement. I'm in a way better position. I've spent way less money, and I'm advancing people within my organization, creating retention with multiple employees. My whole organization sees that I'm promoting from within. Otherwise, I'm going to be trying to replace Steve. And I'm going to have 2 weeks to do it because he's going to walk in my office and say, here's my 2-week notice. And this is what I will challenge you with when you start looking at employees. We really, that too good conundrum, I watch how badly that affects a lot of businesses. And it's not just on the collision side. We see it all over in industry. People are really good at what they do, and so we're afraid to move them up because how are we going to replace them? It's really the wrong attitude, the wrong position to take. So again, as you're doing this and you get that value matrix, I encourage you to take the value matrix and sit down and look at the positions, the roles in your organization, and to determine how valuable each one of those roles is within your immediate organization, and then evaluate the people that you have in each one of those roles to determine the risk value to be able to say, hey, I should be looking for a replacement, I should be developing somebody, or I think I'm in pretty good shape. And I'll wrap up with this. What if I don't have a succession plan? Paul, you've been talking about all the succession planning stuff. What if I decide not to do this? Well, that's absolutely your choice. But if you do that, a couple of warnings. Number one, you're going to be forced to react. So we just talked about Steve. If I'm developing Steve and I'm helping to control that pathway where he's going, I'm able to control how it affects my business. If I don't do that, I react when Steve walks in and says, I've taken another job. This is my 2-week notice. It takes me to bullet point 2. Now I've got 2 weeks to make a decision on how I'm going to replace an excellent manager, right? We've already established that Steve was really good at what he did, but I didn't take advantage of that and help develop him. So now I have to replace him. So now I'm not just trying to replace a good manager or replace Steve in 2 weeks. I have to replace Steve, and I have to do it in 2 weeks. That's really hard to do. So in order to work around that, I'm going to have to force other people in my staff to take on roles they're not ready for because they haven't been developed. And now I'm setting them up for failure, right? So now I go back and I say, okay, Paul, Steve left. He gave us 2 weeks notice. I need you to step into his role because you're the assistant manager here. You're the lead estimator. I need you to step into that manager role. But I may not be ready to step into that manager role, and it may create a lot of issues with your staff, with your business partners, with the way things are run in your organization, because I didn't take the time to help control what Steve was doing in his career. So it worked, again, for my advantage, and I was able to use that within my organization. Now I'm stuck. So I got to move somebody into a role they're not ready for, which is immediately setting them up for failure. And I have to move someone that's there, so I don't have control over this. When Steve was there, if I could help move him into that regional manager role and move the right people into his seat, I have control over my business. Now it's a crapshoot because I moved somebody who's not ready for that position into that position in a very short amount of time because I had to make a snap decision in order to react to Steve leaving. So I don't have the control over my business that I want. And the person that, so you move me up into that role as Paul, you move me into that manager role. I may not be the person you really wanted to move into that manager role, but you had to settle for me because I was what was available. And now I move into a role that I'm not prepared for. It's going to create undue stress on me. And that ultimately, as I see it again throughout all types of industries, that's going to be taken out on my employees, right? I'm not going to be confident in how to do the job. My employees are going to suffer because they're not going to have the quality leadership they need. They're not going to have the decision making, or maybe it goes the other direction and I start ruling with an iron fist because I'm not confident in what I'm doing, so I overcompensate. We see all of these scenarios play out. And all of these scenarios, and I bet I've got people out there nodding their heads right now because you've been through this, and all of that happens because we didn't identify that Steve wanted to be a regional manager and help him get there. If we had addressed Steve, I could have avoided all these other problems. And these are the points that I like to make to business owners and managers. As you're listening today, I really hope this was beneficial to you because I see this happen all over. I work all over the United States and Canada, and I can't tell you how many times I've seen these exact scenarios play out. And again, I'm sure a lot of you are nodding your heads because you've seen it as well. So with that, Melissa had asked me, and she's going to send this to you, but I will talk about some of the things that Pro Collision Training does. And I put some pricing on here, and I will tell you that Melissa and I discussed this in advance. And what I do is I've offered her MSO pricing. So I do a lot of work with like Mike Anderson and some other people. And I've offered RDA the same pricing that I offer Mike Anderson's groups. So this is, it's about 1/3 off my normal pricing for these types of classes. So we talked about the survey process. That's something that we do, succession planning, building the chessboard, development planning. The 3 classes that I'm most known for that we do the most work with are the new estimator training, intermediate estimating training, and repair planner training. And I will just very briefly, a new estimator is designed to take someone who's never written an estimate and within a week get them to the point where they can write a $2,500, maybe $3,000 walk-in, all cosmetic, no structural, as a non-structural cosmetic estimate for a walk-in. No insurance, no DRP programs, nothing like that. They just be able to write your basic walk-in estimate. Intermediate estimator training is going to get very heavily involved into understanding the role of the insurance company, very heavy in negotiations. We write a lot of estimates and negotiate a lot of estimates in class. We get into suspension, steering, the use of die penetrant, how to estimate aluminum, all the different construction materials that are out there, the use of manufacturer repair procedures and the importance of that, and ultimately the importance of documentation to try and get paid for what we're doing in the shop. And then repair planner training is exactly that. We teach the students how to work with a teardown technician and build a complete repair plan, and that would be the third step in that. We have mentor training. A lot of folks, like we addressed, that are not prepared to, technicians are not prepared to mentor an apprentice. So we have a 2-day class that we come in and actually teach them how to mentor people, even to the point that we can provide curriculum for different roles for your organization to use. And then we have manager training as well. So those are some of the things that we do. We have some other offerings as well, but that's some of what we do. As you see down there at the bottom, none of that includes travel expense. And then I just want to talk about our organization a little bit. So it's a focus of Pro Collision Training to make training accessible, convenient, and cost-effective for our customers. So in order to do that, we don't ask you to send people to us for training. We actually schedule classes either in your facility or regionally. So we're happy to come to you, and my organization, my whole program is built to come to you. It's mobile, so that's what we like to do. We understand that your people are in production during the day, so we can do classes during the day, we can do them at night, we can do them on the weekends. Again, I want to be accessible and convenient for you. It doesn't have to be that way for me. We want to work with you. So we'll build a training schedule. When I'm in town, we'll build a training schedule that works for you as an employer and allows you to not lose production while still getting your people trained. Some of the classes, like the new estimator and intermediate estimator mainly, can be offered in 3 days instead of 5 days. There's a reduction in price for that, but there's also a reduction in the amount of information presented. So there are things we're not going to cover, maybe some of the steering, suspension, refinish information, but we're still going to focus on the negotiation pieces. I don't like to do the class in 3 days because it really is, it's a lot for 5 days, but I will do it in 3 days simply because, again, I understand from a production standpoint. I just don't want people to think they're going to get all the information that they would get in a 5-day class in 3 days, because you're absolutely not. And then the last point there, we're open and flexible to schedules. We don't want to interfere with your production. So again, we want to create an ease of use and an ease of access for training. So with that, Melissa, I am going to give everybody my contact information and turn it over and see if there's any questions.
Okay. Well, actually, the question I had was, were people who missed the very beginning, were they going to get a copy of this? So as I said, I am recording it, and there will be a link, so you can go back, and I'm sure a lot of you will want to go back and see the presentation again. But a question did just come through. How do these ideas work with older techs, and how do you change their viewpoint?
Well, sometimes you can't change your viewpoint, but we certainly do try. And one of the things, the approach that I take with older techs is I establish, first of all, how long do they want their career to last? And then how do we move them into a place where we can extend that career? So a lot of times we'll take an older tech who's got a lot of experience and we say, okay, we're going to put a mentor, or we're going to make you a mentor. We're going to put an apprentice with you. And they don't want to do that. But if I'm able to approach them and say, look, I can extend your career if you would be willing to take your expertise and apply it to new people coming into my organization. You're a great part of our organization. We want you to stay with us. We'd like to give you this opportunity to work this way, but we can't do that if you're going to stay where you're at and you're not willing to work with people. If you're willing to help, grow younger technicians, we have this way of extending your career. So it's really a matter of finding out what's important to that older technician. I can tell you right now, it's not going to work with all of them, but that's not older technicians, that's all technicians. There are some that have absolutely no desire to advance people. They want to show up, do their job, go home. So that's where we have to, just understand that not everybody wants to advance. Not everybody wants to develop. Not everybody wants to help other people develop. and we have to take those people for what they are in our organization and utilize them to the best of their ability and ours. I hope that answers the question.
Okay. Anybody else have questions? And we did say we will follow up with everybody who attended, and we'll send you Paul's information as well as a presentation and a copy of the, what was the form that you sent me, Paul?
The value matrix?
Yes, value matrix. I'll send that out as well. Okay, I don't see any more questions. It's been an hour, right on schedule, and thank you so much, Paul. An excellent presentation. I'm sure a lot of people are going to go back and revisit, as well as show it to people who missed it. And I'm also going to ask everybody in the email that I send out is who would be interested in a sequel to this webinar, part 2, I guess we could say. And if you're interested, we'll get Paul back with us, and we'll schedule another webinar and let you know when we're going to do that. So thank you, everybody. Thank you, Paul. Excellent information, and looking forward to working with you in the future. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you very much.